So, yes, as far as a distraction, we had to still address what was going on. That's why I gave Craig the floor at the beginning. We talked about modern wrestling, and now it's the moment everybody is apparently tuning in for every week. Now that I've split it up, it's all about wrestling historians. So, Craig, the floor is yours once again.
Thank you, Daniel. If ever there was a time to go back to the words kinder and simpler were never more in effect than they are right now during this segment, because we're going to go back in a time where wrestling arenas were filled with people from different races and ages and ethnic backgrounds. No social distancing, crammed in together, packed like lemmings into shiny metal boxes to watch their favorite sport, professional wrestling. And I'm going to take you back in a time in a week in professional wrestling, back when territories ruled the United States, where in all 50 states there was wrestling. Just like there are protests in all 50 states now, there was wrestling in all 50 states regularly. Back when titles were called belts, and back when sports entertainment didn't have entertainment. The one thing that what made it entertaining was professional wrestling. We're going to get back to May 28th. Now, on last week's Wrestling Historian, you remember that for the first and only time in wrestling pay-per-view history, at WWF's In Your House, Beware of Dog in South Carolina, a storm, not unlike the one that's hitting Philadelphia in the Delaware Valley right now.
Really? Jesus Christ.
What are the odds? Knocked out the power during the pay-per-view. Well, this May 28th was the makeup date for WWF In Your House, Beware of Dog, and they were having a TV taping in New Charleston, South Carolina, so they decided to run the 3 matches that only the live crowd saw, and they ran those 3 matches again for that pay-per-view makeup show. So those 3 matches were Savio Vega defeating the ringmaster Steve Austin in a Caribbean strap match, or Caribbean strap match if you go that way, with the provision being that if Austin lost, his manager would have to leave the WWF. Well, Savio Vega touched all 4 corners, which is how you win a Caribbean strap match, or a Caribbean, defeated the ringmaster Steve Austin. So his manager, Ted DiBiase, was fired from the WWF. Good thing, too, Dan, because he had already signed a contract with WCW.
Good.
This was
that's right. Yeah.
This is May 28th, 1996.
Uh-huh.
Also on that card, the second match, Vader defeated Yokozuna with a Vader bomb. These 2 men, 18 months earlier, were both world champions of their respective federations. Vader was the WCW world champion, and Yokozuna was the WWF world champion. But here they are, facing each other, with no belts on the line. And the other third match that the home crowd saw, but the pay-per-view crowd didn't. The Intercontinental Champion Goldust defeated The Undertaker in a casket match, because when the lid of the casket was lifted off, Mankind was inside, and he gave the mandible claw to The Undertaker, causing The Undertaker to lose to Goldust. Go figure.
Wow.
On that same TV taping, Dan, because they had the pay-per-view matches first, and then they had some TV tapings, both the Smoking Guns and the New Rockers, Marty Jannetty and Leif Cassidy, defeated this up-and-coming young teenage tag team. During this TV taping, both the Smoking Guns and the New Rockers defeated Matt and Jeff Hardy.
Oh, wow. Wow.
May 28th, 1996. Also, on that same TV card, fresh off of not having a manager anymore, Steve Austin defeated Jason Arndt with the Stone Cold Stunner, the first time he ever used it. May 28th, 1996. May 29th, 1977, Dan, a landmark date in professional wrestling history. If only Harley Race hadn't messed it up.
Uh-oh.
In May 29th, 1977, in Houston, Texas, NWA Stronghold, defending their belts, WWF Heavyweight Champion Superstar Billy Graham defeated the Alaskan Mike York. The AWA champion Nick Bockwinkel went to a draw with Jose Lothario. And then later on, the AWA champion Nick Bockwinkel wrestled again and went to a draw with Terry Funk. The only thing missing was NWA champion Harley Race, who due to travel restrictions or travel problems couldn't make it there. So Nick Bockwinkel wrestled Harley Race's opponent, Terry Funk. The AWA champion wrestled twice, going to a draw with Jose Lothario and again with Terry Funk. But if Harley Race was able to make it, that meant that all three world champions would have been on the same card. The NWA champion, the AWA champion, and the WWF champion would have been on the same card.
So close.
So close. But the AWA champion wrestled twice and wrestled the NWA champion's opponent. And Superstar Billy Graham, the WWF heavyweight champion, defeated Mike the Alaskan York. On that same card, Jimmy Snuka went up against Bruiser Brody, and the Spoiler defeated Gino Hernandez.
Wow.
1977. May 29th, 1984, big day here in the Northeast, because May 29th, 1984, at the Meadowlands Arena in Jersey was the NWA debut. I should say the debut of the NWA. The first time they'd ever held a card in the Northeast. And it was packed with stars from Georgia Championship Wrestling, Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, and Puerto Rico. The national heavyweight champion Ronnie Garvin defeated Jake the Snake Roberts. The national tag team champions, the Road Warriors, defeated the team of Jimmy Valiant, the Boogie Woogie Man, and King Kong Bundy. The Puerto Rican WWC champion Carlos Colon defeated the NWA TV champion Tully Blanchard. And for the first time, north of the Mason-Dixon line, the NWA champion Ric Flair took his feud with his greatest rival, the United States champion Ricky Steamboat. And Flair beat Steamboat in a 32-minute, 48-second match that was phenomenal. But it was the first time those two took their talents north. That was the NWA debut in the Northeast at the Meadowlands Arena. Special ring announcer for that card, Dan, the first ever Night of Champions, Bob Costas.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Huge wrestling fan.
I didn't know. Well, I knew he's a huge wrestling fan, and I know him and Vince have had, good days and bad days. But I didn't know he was the – wow, that's cool. I didn't know that.
He was a ring announcer for the NWA's debut in the Meadowlands Night of Champions. And that happened that night, May 29th, 1984. That day, the WWF had a TV taping in Allentown. And I remember some of these matches that took place during this TV taping that stretched out over many weeks. Intercontinental champion Tito Santana went to a double countout with Cowboy Bob Orton Jr. This is before the cast. Before the bout, though, the ring announcer, Joe McHugh, introduced the WWF heavyweight champion Hulk Hogan, who came out and shook hands with the crowd and gave his headband to a kid at ringside. But probably the biggest thing that happened during that TV taping, Dan, May 29th, 1984, was a very special Piper's Pit, where Piper had his guest Lou Albano, and Lou Albano brought out Cyndi Lauper.
Ah, thus the beginning.
The beginning of the Rock and Wrestling a connection.
I think.
Because Captain Lou Albano had claimed to be Cyndi Lauper's manager. Cyndi Lauper's star had just begun to ascend. Girls Just Want to Have Fun was a #1 hit. She Bop was also on its way to the top 10. And obviously the video, Girls Just Want to Have Fun, heavy rotation on MTV. That's the first time many of the world got to see Captain Lou Albano playing Cindy's dad in the video. Lou, of course, went over to say he was Cindy's manager, and that he would bring her on Piper's Pit and have Cindy tell Piper that he was that Lou was, of course. Cindy goes, "Oh, I love Lou, but he's not my manager," and that's when all hell broke loose. But yep, May 29th, 1984, Cyndi Lauper appeared on Piper's Pit. May 30th, 1986, Houston, Texas. We're back in Houston, Dan.
Good old Houston.
Good old Houston. You gonna say?
No, I was just laughing. I said, "Good old Houston."
Yes, that doesn't always apply, but
Nope.
in wrestling terminology in the past, it does. Because on this day, May 30th, 1986, in Houston, was crowned the first UWF heavyweight champion. Bill Watts, Mid-South Territory, long been a hotbed of great professional wrestling. Before it was bought by the NWA, they were going to take away the Mid-South. The Mid-South North American heavyweight champion was a top belt. It was held at the time by Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Bill Watts did away with it, and it was going to have a tournament to decide the new champion, and that champion would be the UWF heavyweight champion. And the tournament, you remember something, Dan?
No, finish what you're going to say, because I have a question for the historian's teacher, sir.
Oh, thank you. Well, the tournament, the UWF tournament, had a whole bevy of future Hall of Famers in this. To give you an idea how the first round went, Kamala defeated Sting, and Ted DiBiase defeated Rock. Now, Rock and Sting were the Blade Runners at the time. So Kamala defeated the very green Sting, and Ted DiBiase defeated the very green, even greener Ultimate Warrior.
I was going to say the greener.
Yeah, Ultimate Warrior. So that was Kamala and Ted DiBiase. And the eventual winner, Terry Gordy of the Fabulous Freebirds. But to get to the finals, Terry Gordy defeated Hall of Famers Coco Beware, Snicker, Ted DiBiase, his future World Tag Team Champion partner, Steve Dr. Death Williams, and Hacksaw Duggan in the finals. Those are the four people that Terry Gordy had to beat, all with the pile driver.
Jeez.
Coco Beware, Ted DiBiase, Dr. Death Steve Williams, and Hacksaw Duggan, all pinned in the center of the ring by the biggest and baddest freebird of them all, the first singles title in his history. Terry Gordy, long thought of as the weak link of the Freebirds, but only because he was so young and so big. But this was Bill Watts, obviously, from the time that Terry Gordy was 19, main eventing in the Superdome against Junkyard Dog and again against Andre the Giant, that this man was head and shoulders above everyone else on the team. And awarding Terry Gordy the UWF Heavyweight Championship was the crowning achievement of what wrestling fans already knew, that Terry Gordy was pound for pound the best big man in all of professional wrestling. And in 1986, that's putting him above Hulk Hogan, putting him above Bam Bam Bigelow, and having him go. And this is a one-night tournament. That same night against Coco, Ted DiBiase, Dr. Death Steve Williams, and Hacksaw Duggan was a coronation. And Terry Gordy on May 30th, 1986 became the very first UWF heavyweight champion.
First of all, I want to say hi to a new user I haven't seen in the room before, Fabio DiLello. Hello.
I better see Fabio.
Ciao,
Fabio.
And I have to ask the historian this, because this is where I get crossed in what is running where in the late 80s. USWA was also Universal Wrestling Federation. Please help me. I don't remember.
No, USWA was a combination of World Class and Memphis.
Okay. And they also Okay, I asked that because when I go to the network, because I said last week I started back, I was getting tired of 95, 96, went back to 89. So I'm in early 90.
Mm-hmm.
And Universal Wrestling Federation, UWF, is on there.
Yeah.
But it says in the bottom corner USWA.
Okay. No, they're not affiliated. They were never
So
connected.
maybe the picture is wrong. I don't know. I haven't watched it yet because I'm still on. I'm on a house.
And UWF, not to be confused with Herb Abrams UWF.
Yeah, no.
Came years later. I don't know why. Out of all the mistakes Herb Abrams did, I don't know why he couldn't come up with different letters.
Well, there's a lot of things that Herb Abrams couldn't come up with.
But I
mean,
if you talk about hookers and blow,
you know what I'm saying?
But May 30th, Houston, Texas, the first UWF heavyweight champion is crowned. Also, what happened on May 30th? Happy belated birthday to Aurelian Jake Smith Jr., who I'm looking at right now. Happy belated 65th birthday to Jake the Snake Roberts.
You know, it's cool to say that because he wasn't supposed to be here. We all, if you had money in the dead pool of wrestling, 98% of us would have said, well, Jake.
Yes.
Jake had demons. Jake had a major addiction issues. Well, I say had. You don't ever get rid of those. You have. No. You just battle them.
Yes.
And he is, and he's with us, and he cuts promos better than half the people on that roster. On any roster, he would do the same.
Yeah,
the one thing I always think about Jake is that goddamn Beyond the Mat movie. And they interview his goddamn piece of S father.
Yeah.
Who raped his mother, and that's why he is with us. And he says the words that he was born out of love, and I still love him. To the camera.
Mm-hmm.
While he doesn't speak to his son standing right there.
No.
Grizzly Smith, who was a professional wrestler, who was probably that whole family situation, the crux of what drove Jake to the initial addiction, and then being on the road, and then all the baggage that comes with that all year.
Mm-hmm.
And I just was like, even at that age, when that movie came out, I was 17, 16, maybe 17.
Yeah.
And hi, Undead Lords. I knew you were there, and thank you for saying hi. I wanted to reach through the screen when he said that and just choke him. And he'd kill me because he's Grizzly Smith.
Yeah.
But still, I was like, what? How did you just say that? Have you not been in? Read the room that you're in. I don't know. I always think of his father's words and go, oh, my God, what a terrible.
That scene in Beyond the Mat, for those of you who haven't seen it, where Jake was talking about his upbringing and how he got into the business to be close to his dad, something that every wrestler that is a second-generation wrestler will say. But it was one of the most painfully awkward scenes because neither one of them, and outside of Grizzly talking to the camera, neither one of those guys spoke to each other during that whole scene. So you have a little glimpse of what their relationship was like. Because remember, when Jake Roberts made his big break, when he got his big break on Georgia Championship Wrestling, and then he went to the Mid-South right when it was ascending, when they had Hall of Fame talents already, like Ted DiBiase, like Hacksaw Duncan, like Junkyard Dog, like Butch Reed, the Midnight Express, the Rock and Roll, et cetera, et cetera. Grizzly Smith was the matchmaker.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that they were father and son until years later, because there was no acknowledgement. I understand you want to protect the business or anything like that, but from everyone that dealt with them both, from Ted DiBiase to Jim Cornette, when your dad's there and you look at Vince and Shane, or even you look at Dusty and Dustin, and even Jerry Lawler and Brian Christopher in Memphis, there was always interaction. It's like, yeah, I know that's the boss's kid, and he's getting a big push, and in some cases it was earned, some cases it wasn't, but they still had an interaction. As hell, Bill and Eric Watts, but you would never know Grizzly Smith and his son Aurelian Jake Jr. were
great name, by the way.
Yeah, Aurelan. But they were strangers to each other. But the only reason Jake wanted to be a wrestler in the first place so he can be closer to his dad, like so many other second generation wrestlers say. But happy 65th birthday, Jake. I had money on you in 1999. I thought you would have been. I thought you wouldn't make it to the year 2000 was what
And
what I had money on.
I'm glad he's here.
I am too. And like
Yeah.
you said, great promos on AEW, and he can still deliver it with the best of them. May 31st, 1998, the WWF held its first. Well, he only had two, but the first Over the Edge pay-per-view in Milwaukee. And I just remember it just because of the main event. With the deck stacked against him, the WWF champion Steve Austin went up against Dude Love with Vince McMahon as a special guest referee, Pat Patterson the special guest ring announcer, and Gerald Briscoe as the timekeeper. And Vince McMahon said, "Only my hand will count to three. There's no any other referee here counts to three. It don't count." So during the match with Dude Love, Dude accidentally knocked Vince McMahon out with a chair, and out comes the Undertaker, who puts Pat Patterson through a table, and then Jerry Briscoe through a table. Austin stuns Dude Love, picks up Vince McMahon's cold dead hands, and counts the fall himself. 1, 2, 3. Just remember the fans going crazy. There was 9,822 fans there, and it did a 0.58 buy rate. It just seemed a lot bigger back then. But that happened May 31st, 1998. June 2nd, 1983 was the finals of the first International Wrestling Grand Prix tournament in Japan, the IWGP belt, which will be held by some of the great professional wrestlers of all time. Maybe Bob Backlund, Brock Lesnar, Vader, AJ Styles. Well, the first was crowned June 2nd, 1983. Now, they had a field of 10 wrestlers, and some of the 10 involved were Antonio Inoki, Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, future AWA heavyweight champion Otto Wanz, Killer Khan, Big John Studd, Dino Bravo, all in this tournament to crown the first IWGP International Wrestling Grand Prix heavyweight champion. Now, there was a round-robin tournament, and there was a point system. So at the end of the round-robin, Hulk Hogan and Antonio Inoki both had 37 points because it was points for a pinfall, points for disqualification, points for a countout if you won by any of those measures. Well, Hogan and Inoki both had 37 points, one ahead of Andre the Giant, who had 36 points. So Hulk Hogan and Antonio Inoki were in the finals for the International Wrestling Grand Prix Championship. It's coming, Dana. The good part's coming.
I'm so sorry.
It's been a long week. It's been a long week.
You understand. Thank you.
Oh my! I understand.
It was sarcasm.
I got it. No, I don't get it.
No, you don't. No.
But during the match, Inoki gets thrown out of the ring. He goes back on the apron. Hogan goes against the other side and hits Inoki with a clothesline, or the axe bomber, as he called it. The Japanese rings, the ringside areas, are very small.
Yeah.
And when he got hit with the clothes line, he took a step where there normally would be ring and there wasn't. And he fell off the ring apron head first on the concrete and was legitimately knocked out, knocked unconscious.
All right.
That was not the end of the match. That was not the planned finish. No one, including the referee, knew what to do. So the match was declared over, and Hulk Hogan, whether he was supposed to be or not, was crowned the very first International Wrestling Grand Prix, the IWGP Heavyweight Champion. Not only was he the first American to win it, he was the first ever champion. And this was shown on Japanese TV over and over and over again, and that made Hulk Hogan, before coming to the WWF, the biggest American star in Japan, before Stan Hansen, before Andre, before anyone else, before Vader. Hulk Hogan was even recorded a song in Japan called Ichiban, number
Right.
one.
That's right.
But this is post Rocky 3, but pre WWF. And he was wrestling in Japan because of his falling out with the AWA. But Hulk Hogan, June 2nd, 1983, became the very first International Wrestling Grand Prix, the IWGP Heavyweight Champion, by accidentally knocking out Antonio Inoki. On that same card, Tiger Mask, the greatest junior heavyweight champion of all time, won his second NWA Junior Heavyweight Championship. Previously on The Wrestling Historian, I noted that Tiger Mask won his first NWA Junior Heavyweight Championship
Yeah, you
in
did.
1982,
Yeah.
and his epic feud with the Dynamite Kid. While in one of those epic matches, Tiger Mask injured his leg and had to relinquish the NWA Junior Heavyweight title. Well, on this date, June 2nd, 1983, he regained it from the reigning champion Kuniaki Kobayashi to begin once again the epic reign of Tiger Mask, the original Tiger Mask, Satoru Sayama, the greatest junior heavyweight, cruiserweight, light heavyweight wrestler of all time. That was June 2nd, 1983. That same date, Dan, while all that was happening in Japan, in Missouri, Harley Race would defeat Dewey Robertson for the Central States Heavyweight title. It's very important that you remember that. Not for this week, but for next week. But June 2nd, 1983, Harley Race defeated Dewey Robertson for the Central States Heavyweight Championship. That would be his 8th time holding the Central States Heavyweight Championship. And that would be the last title that Dewey Robertson would ever hold, because Dewey Robertson, later on that year, would become the missing link. I guess Dewey Robertson wasn't working anymore.
Every time I think of the missing link, I think of Bobby. I think of Bobby Heenan.
Oh,
Where you know what's you think of Bobby Heenan, where he's like, "Well, you're going to be my manager, so I need you to get my stuff at this. And I need you to be up at this time and get my stuff." And, "Hi, girl, how you doing?" "Yes, Daddy." "Thank you for that. I am your daddy." Or you mean Claude Giroux is your daddy? I'll tell you in a second, Craig, why Claude Giroux is daddy.
okay.
And then Bobby just says to the missing link, "I'm not your manager. I'm a manager on TV. Get your own goddamn bags." Thank you, Bobby. Bobby was literally like, for people he called, yeah, Claude. That's what I thought. Yeah, Claude Giroux is my daddy. I got news for you. Bobby was a manager except for until the cameras weren't rolling. Like, he was nobody's bitch.
No.
Nope. If anything, most wrestlers, even at that part, even in the early '80s, were already Bobby's bitch. Just the way it is. I'll bring it up at the end of the show. Continue, please.
Okay. June 2nd, 1987. Staying on that date. In Buffalo, New York, at a WWF TV taping, a little more than 2 months after winning the Intercontinental title in one of the greatest matches of all time, over Randy Savage at WrestleMania 3, Ricky Steamboat would lose the Intercontinental Championship to the Honky Tonk Man. And on June 2nd, 1987, it would start the longest reigning Intercontinental title run in history. It's been 33 years, Daniel, and no one, absolutely no one, has held the Intercontinental title longer than the Honky Tonk Man, Wayne Ferris. 454 days, 15 months. But it started June 2nd, 1987.
How do you feel about that, Mr. Historian?
that the Honky Tonk Man is
That
still
it's the Honky
reigning,
Man. That it is the Honky Tonk Man that has that.
the longest reigning Intercontinental title. Um, it, I don't want to say the phrase "it is what it is" because I genuinely hate that phrase.
Yeah.
I don't know why anyone else hasn't held it longer. But I will say, when you think of great Intercontinental champions, he never comes up. You know, everyone always says Savage, even though he only held it once, or they'll say Michaels, or they say Bret Hart, or even Rock, or Austin, because those are the Intercontinental champions are the working man's side. Those are the titles that the wrestlers wanted to win. Dolph Ziggler, Chris Jericho all said the only title they wanted to win was the Intercontinental belt because that meant they were the best workers in the company. And Shawn Michaels, Razor Ramon match, that was for the greatest ladder match of all time. That was for the Intercontinental belt. The largest crowd overseas at SummerSlam, 88,000 in the Wembley Arena. You see Davey Boy Smith versus Bret Hart. That was for the Intercontinental Championship. So, am I okay with Honky Tonk Man being the longest reigning? Sure. But when you think of the Intercontinental Championship, never think of the Honky Tonk Man. I don't know if that's a slap in the face to him, but and also I know now how I feel about the WWF, knowing that someone who holds the belt longer than anyone else doesn't mean that they're the best. The New Day, I will never consider the best tag team in the history of the WWF, but they've held it longer than any other tag team in the WWF. I consider them jokes, but but I mean the second longest reign is Pedro Morales, and he held it for 15 months too.
The New Day thing, we're never going to see eye to eye on. It's allowed. I'm allowed. I'll debate it with you. I won't hold it against you, but you're blowing my mind here. Every time you say it, I forget. It blows my mind.
Yeah, I just don't consider them a great tag team. I consider them a three-man comedy group.
You can't take the ability away.
I can't take the ability away. I really miss Xavier Woods though.
Man, he gets essed on by fans and other. It's one of those things where it's like musicians. Like I get angry sometimes when, for example, Phil Collins does not get the due he deserves as far as a drummer.
No.
But, and you know this, especially the black musicians know he's cool.
Oh, God, yes.
And they know he's a badass. And they acknowledge he's there was a whole Urban Renewal CD that came out in 2001. Just black artists, R&B and rap, that were covering him. And because they know he is, period. But it does bother me sometimes that he is a musician's musicians. That musicians acknowledge him, but people don't acknowledge that. All he is the Tarzan guy now. You know how old I know I am? I was trying to explain Phil Collins to somebody who was way younger than me. I was like, In the Air Tonight. She's like, I don't know. Tarzan. Oh, son of a bitch. Yeah. The same thing with Consequences Creed / Xavier Woods.
Yeah. That
dude's ability is up there with any of the best wrestlers out there today. Period. End of story. And to prove your point than mine, he is considered a joke, and he's not.
No,
he was great on TNA, and he had great matches in the early days of the WWE.
Yeah.
But the wrestlers know it, was my point. The wrestlers know how good he is, and it's a shame that the fans don't, because I miss Xavier Woods for that reason. There's a reason why he hurt his knee. Let's just say that.
Yeah, and I always saw him as the Buddy Roberts of the New Day because he always took the most insane bumps, and he's the one that could do it. And I didn't mean to inadvertently dump on the New Day. When I think of great WWF tag teams, the fact that they're the longest reigning.
How dare you?
Or have the most. It's like and when I think of great WWF tag teams, I would never think of the New Day.
Don't you goddamn back off on me. You think they're a joke, and we agree on their ability, but they're a joke. You're right. I'm wrong. I'll tell you, I'm wrong. And I love them that they're a joke, because I love the New Day.
And people say the same about the Honky Tonk Man.
He was a joke.
That he was a joke. Or that the people that he held it for 15 months against people that he couldn't carry their jock.
Didn't matter.
Yeah, and the reason why, because Ricky, because his wife was pregnant at the time, so he couldn't. People always look. Ricky Steamboat to me is the epitome, the top of babyface workers. He's There is no one else other better than him. Like I said, no offense to Kurt Hennig, but there's only one Mr. Perfect. It's Ricky Steamboat. But you look at all of his championship reigns; they were very short, and more or less because of what was going on outside the ring. He beats Randy Savage in the greatest match at the time that anyone's ever seen. Savage held it for 8 months, and Steamboat holds it for 2, less than 2, and he loses on the TV bout to Honky Tonk Man. But I shouldn't complain because karmic justice comes through because Honky Tonk Man held it for 15 months, longer than anyone in the history of professional wrestling, but he lost in 31 seconds.
That's true. But
So,
my point was
yeah.
he was a good wrestler, and people
Yes.
forget that. All they know is the later days Honky Tonk Man joke BS.
Hmm.
He was no slouch, folks. He got to where he
No,
was for a reason.
exactly, because he was a damn good heel, and he knows what the fans wanted to see. They want to see him get his ass beat, and he did that. And a quick story about the Honky Tonk Man. I don't know if you heard the stories about. He was he Honky Tonk Man. This is back before there was cable TV, and every week they had to. Um, Never did a job on TV. He was very adamant about not losing
Oh,
on TV. Did
okay.
tons of jobs on the road, in non-title matches, in tag team matches. He got pinned routinely, but never wanted to lose on TV ever. So when Saturday night's main event came up, and they wanted him to drop the belt to Randy Savage, the famous Miss Elizabeth, the Savage face turn. The Honky Tonk Man tells the story and has told it several times, and he hasn't gone back on it. So I tend to believe what he had to say. They go to Vince's house. Honky Tonk, Randy, Liz, and Vince talking about the finish and how they want Honky Tonk Man to lose. Vince and Randy are talking about what they're going to do with the belt afterwards and where they're going to go and who they're feuding with. Like Honky Tonk wasn't in the ring. They're both Randy and Honky Tonk are sitting on Vince's couch right next to each other. But Randy and Vince are talking about what happens after Randy wins. Honky Tonk was so fed up, he talked to his old buddy Jim Cornette, who was in the NWA at the time.
No,
So
really?
You talk about Medusa dropping the women's title in the trash can um, for almost 14 years later. Honky Tonk Man was fitting to leave. If I can be a Southern wild-eyed Southern boy for a second, fitting to leave the WWF with the Intercontinental belt. That's how upset he was
Wow.
about
I
having
never
to.
knew that. I
Yeah,
never knew that story.
yeah. So he goes back to Vince. He got talked into going back to Vince. I'm not dropping the belt, but we can still give the fans what they want. Turn Savage face, because we'll do this with Elizabeth and the Hart Foundation. But yeah, he was very protect. He would
Well,
not.
that sounds familiar.
Yeah, but he would not lose the belt on TV. He did not want to do any jobs on TV.
Well, sometimes we don't always get what we want.
We don't. But if you try sometimes,
You get
you
what you
get what
need.
you need.
Sorry.
Staying on that date, June 2nd, there's some sad goodbyes. Unfortunately, this is June 2nd, 1998. We had to say goodbye to Sylvester Ritter.
Oh,
Uh, and I found this out, Dan. I found out that we lost Junkyard Dog through ESPN, of all places.
that's how big this
That's
was.
how huge he was, and that's how huge it was. I found that Junkyard Dog died on ESPN. Fell asleep at the wheel on his driving from North Carolina to Georgia. Unfortunately, he had fallen on hard times. He was repossessing cars at the time. He was the biggest star in the Mid-South, um, selling out the Superdome, every stadium in the South, including Houston. He was the number one black babyface in all of professional wrestling. And this was before but also making more money than in anyone else either. Uh, he was known for his partying habits when he was in the Mid South. Now, the Mid South, the traveling schedule was grueling because he not only did you have to make Louisiana territories, but
Jeez.
Mississippi, Alabama, and Houston every once in a while, and the shows were syndicated. So traveling was tough, but it wasn't unbearable. And he had a hard time staying in shape then, and he was the number one face in the entire company, and also appearing on Georgia Championship Wrestling and in the Mid Atlantic uh, television tapings. So all this was before he got to the WWF, where the traveling was insane. Where in the Mid South, you're driving everywhere 500 miles at a time during a day. Now you're flying from Miami on Monday to Toronto on Tuesday to Los Angeles on Wednesday to Chicago on Thursday to Boston on Friday, back to San Francisco on Saturday, even though you were just in Los Angeles 2 days before. He was known as fond of the nose candy. He missed
Slightly.
several shows. A couple shows that I attended at the Spectrum, he was supposed to co-main event. He never showed up for. Um, but that was a habit that was going on throughout the latter part of his career, where he let himself get a little out of shape. Um, One of the matches I left out of the historian was when he came back, uh, when he went to the NWA in 1990. He had a series of matches with Ric Flair where he pinned Flair in a non-title matches, and the shows were sold out. That was in 1990, his last big run. Um, but Junkyard Dog hopefully, will always be remembered as one of the greatest baby faces in professional wrestling history, uh, black or otherwise. Bill Watts will always get credit for being one of the greatest bookers of all time, one of the most innovative minds. But it was Bill Watts who saw the crowds that they were getting in Oklahoma and in New Orleans and in Mississippi and Arkansas, and just like Sputnik Monroe, you know, 30 years earlier, saw the amount of African Americans in that paid good money because they love professional wrestling, but they didn't have one of their own to cheer for. And he sees Sylvester Ritter, trained in the Hart family dungeon, who had his first big break in Stampede as Big Daddy Ritter, and Bill Watts, who had always been close with Stu Hart and other promoters. Uh, can I have Sylvester Ritter? I got an idea, and that idea would be to rename him the Junkyard Dog. He brought him in under his real name, Sylvester Ritter, wearing the tights and everything, just to see what he looked like,
Yeah.
kind of like what Dusty Rhodes did with Ray Traylor before he got a game and look. And this Ray Traylor, 6'7", 345-pound guy, took a slingshot suplex from Tully Blanchard,
Yeah.
and Dusty said, "That's enough. Gonna keep you off TV, make everyone forget about you, and we're gonna bring you back packaged differently." And Big Bubba Rogers is born. Same thing with Junkyard Dog. Bring you on TV, see what you got. I see the athleticism. He was a former football player. Bill Watts loves former football players, i.e.,
Yeah.
Dr. Death, Hacksaw Duggan. Uh, so Junkyard Dog fit that mold. And because the number of African Americans in the crowd paying good money because they love wrestling, now they had someone to cheer for their own. Pushed to the moon. Ernie Ladd took over the book, and he was also kept him as the number one babyface. Like I said, sold out the Superdome, and I told you the story about the angle with the Freebirds. Before the New Day, folks, it was the Freebirds, greatest three-man tag team of all time. Uh,
I mean, you said that. I didn't. I didn't imply the new day thing. That's
if
you.
there weren't for the Freebirds, there would be no New Day. Is what I'm saying.
I'm just
But
okay. I'm just making sure.
Junkyard Dog story. I know I told on this story on the podcast
Tell it
before.
again.
When the Freebirds did an angle with Junkyard Dog where they used their Freebird hair cream to blind Junkyard Dog, put it in his eyes, and Junkyard Dog couldn't see, was blind. And before the internet, before social media, um, Junkyard Dog sent tapes with his face bandaged and gauze on his eyes, and told the fans that he couldn't see. and that he would miss the birth of his daughter. He couldn't see his baby daughter because he was blind. Fans legitimately were sending Junkyard Dog $500 a week because they thought he was blind.
Oh my
The
God.
fan, this is how loved he was, and then
Oh my God.
believed. So they were sending him money. Okay. So when Junkyard Dog came back, made his way back to the Superdome for a big card, the Freebirds were in a cage match against Colonel Buck Robley and Mike George, the Mid-South Tag Team Champions at the time. And Junkyard Dog was at ringside, eyes bandaged with sunglasses on. And the Freebirds that were taking advantage of Robley and Mike George laid him out. And then Michael Hayes, after the Freebirds, the Jim Ross would say, saw Junkyard Dog at ringside and pointed to him. All he did was point to him. The crowd goes crazy. Junkyard Dog reacts like, what's everyone? Just then, fan leaps over the guardrail. Now, the guardrails here are not like the guardrail we have now. These were bicycle racks that were taped together.
Like heavy metal, rusty,
Yes.
some bitches. Yeah.
Jumps over, grumps up behind Dog and says, "It's okay, Dog, I got them." Pulls out a gun right over Junkyard Dog's left shoulder. So now Junkyard Dog is in a very unique position because if he pretends to be blind, one or all the Freebirds will be shot. If he takes the guy down, then everyone will know he's not blind, and he's dead because Bill Watts is going to kill him for breaking kayfabe. So it's kind of like the old Jack Benny joke, your money or your life. I'm thinking. As luck would
Still
have
funny.
it, yeah, the police got to him before, and this is the other thing back in the day, folks, for big crowds, big wrestling crowds in major cities and in major arenas, they had actual police there to escort the heels back and forth to the ring because that's how bad the crowds would be. Now there's security, and most of the security back then would be former cops or policemen moonlighting, but they had actual policemen at the Superdome. So fortunately, the police caught the guy that had pulled out a gun with live ammunition in it before he could shoot the Freebirds. But that's both how much they hated the Freebirds, but more how much they loved Junkyard Dog. Because all Michael Hayes did was point. And with the faces laid out, they were making their way to Junkyard Dog. They were still in a cage. But when they were making their way to Junkyard Dog, the fan jumped out, told Dog, "I got this," and almost like was kind of like putting the gun on Junkyard Dog's shoulder to level it. And thankfully the police got to him. But that was the love of Junkyard Dog. The very next month, Junkyard Dog takes on Michael Hayes in a dog collar match. The very first dog collar match was Junkyard Dog versus Michael Hayes. Wasn't Roddy Piper versus Greg Valentine at Starrcade '83. It was Junkyard Dog versus Michael Hayes. 26,000 people, where Junkyard Dog was blind, taking on Michael Hayes. Junkyard Dog won the match. The legend of Junkyard Dog began because that was the first time I ever saw him. I only read about him in the After magazine, but that picture of him wrestling with safety goggles on and gauze was the first time I ever saw Junkyard Dog, the late, great Sylvester Ritter. He passed away at only 45, June 2nd, 1998.
Again, I was getting excited because I'm right before WrestleMania in '90.
Mm-hmm.
And I know Junkyard Dog's coming up soon for NWA WCW. So I was like, man, I haven't seen a lot of this in many, many years. The last thing I remember, not the last thing, but one of the things I remember, one of the guys at ringside when Sting beat Flair for the title in '90 is him.
Yeah.
He was there, and Elegante was holding back Ole. Finish wrestling historian because I'm going to do Dan's picks where I bring up something I've seen every week. This is spur of the moment thing. So do your thing.
Okay. Also on the same date, I'm sorry, we say goodbye to another legend. June 2nd, 2003, the death
Oh,
of Classy Freddie Blassie. With a long time, age of 85. He was one of what people just remember him like. I only remember him as a manager, one of the three wise men of the East. Freddie Blassie, Captain Lou Albano, and Grand Wizard of Wrestling, ruled the WWF during my childhood. Those three would bring in heel after heel after heel to try to unseat the great Bruno Sammartino. Freddie Blassie being the only one to actually wrestle Bruno Sammartino
yeah.
in main events across the country. Freddie Blassie, when I got older, when I realized whom he actually was, he was one of the glamour stars of wrestling in the 50s and 60s. Back when television was first invented, one of the most popular shows on any network was professional wrestling. Uh, there was big budgets spent on TV sets and TV cameras and actors. Wrestling, cheap as hell. Just set up a camera in a local arena, showcase it in black and white, goes all over the country. And next thing you know, guys like Freddie Blassie and Gorgeous George and Vern Gagne and Lou Thez are household names. And Freddie Blassie was one of them, not just because of the bleached blonde hair, but because of his personality. I remember being up one time in my youth watching the Dick Van Dyke Show, and there's Freddie Blassie. Freddie Blassie was on the very first Regis Philbin show. When Regis first got his own show, Freddie Blassie was his first guest. Freddie Blassie was a staple in Los Angeles, where he was from, called himself the fashion plate of wrestling. But he would make his bones as because of the amount of wars he had, he legitimately lost sight in his eye. So that cane was real. So it was and it was a collapsible cane, but he would later use it to great effect on many a baby face. And his crowning achievement, he won his only world title, managed his only world title, uh, December 28th, 1983, when the Iron Sheik defeated Bob Backlund. That became Freddie Blassie's only world championship. And the man he would lose it to would be one of Freddie's former managees, Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan's first foray into the World Wrestling Federation, 1979, Freddie Blassie was his manager. When Hogan was slamming Andre the Giant all over the Northeast, Freddie was his manager. He was also part of the Rock and Wrestling. He got that part of the tail end of his career. He got a major look and major push. Bubba Ray Dudley only got back to me on Twitter one time. He had one of those forums. He goes, you know what? I'm bored. Ask me whatever you want. I asked him, you and Devon never really had a manager during your career. If you could have one manager walk you to the aisle for one match, past or present, who would it be? Almost instantly, he wrote back Freddie Blassie.
Wow, he didn't even think about it.
Just like that. Didn't say Jimmy Hart. Didn't even say Paul E. He said Freddie Blassie.
Freddie Blassie. Freddie Blassie still has one of my favorite Paul E stories.
Oh yes, because Freddie Blassie, I told you, was blind in one eye.
Yeah, slightly.
Slightly. And he had a teenage Paul E. drive him.
Paulie's just staying cool.
Yeah.
And to end the story, because I'll get it wrong, but he gets home. Do you remember, or do you want me to do it?
No, please.
So he gets home, and just tell your father you drove. It's fine. What happened to the car? Then Blassie goes, or no, tell him I drove. It's fine. Blassie goes, I can't believe he did this, kid. Are you kidding? He just totally sold him.
Yeah, pencil neck geek.
That's so funny.
Yes, and it was Freddie Blassie that when Andy Kaufman first wanted to do wanted to wrestle women and wanted to pull his Freddie Blassie was his manager. Had Vince Senior said yes, instead of Jimmy Hart in Memphis, it would have been Freddie Blassie. And those of you really big Andy Kaufman fans and Freddie Blassie fans will remember the short indie film that was done by Andy Kaufman called My Breakfast with Blassie. That's still available
That's
somewhere.
right. I've never seen that actually.
Yeah. Well, here's your homework, wrestling historian fans. I know
Oh,
we tell you every week to watch something or do this or what. My Breakfast with Blassie. Find it and enjoy it.
I have more homework coming up at the end of this story.
Okay, and finally, the last thing. Well, not the last thing on this day, June 2nd. I'm talking about losses, and we on that day, June 2nd, we lost Junkyard Dog. We lost Freddie Blassie. More recently, June 2nd, 2014, was the end of the Shield when
Oh,
Seth Rollins turned on Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose. Still, and I will say this because it never happens anymore, I will put this up as one of the great heel turns of all time.
yes. Yes, and legitimately one of the last times.
That was the last time, Dan.
Well, no,
And
the second to last time, because the last time it was live on the show is when Brody Lee showed up in AEW.
Yeah, okay.
That for me. I'm
For
not
me.
arguing. I don't mean no, you're wrong. I mean the only other one was Brody Lee being the Exalted One, and it was live on air. Oh,
But as far as heel turns,
oh
I
yeah,
didn't
nobody
see, I
cares.
didn't see it coming.
No.
Yeah, that hasn't been done. Again, 6 years is the last time like a great heel turn. And out of all the great heel turns in professional wrestling, I had to include this because this is one of the the Shield had just beaten Evolution the night before on a pay-per-view, laid him out, and Randy Orton and Triple H come to the ring, said the thing about always having to adapt. We always have a backup plan. Last night was Plan A. Tonight it's Plan B. And
There's
Seth wax
always a plan B.
always a Plan B. Wax Roman. That's the same. And Dean, his eyes go crazy because obviously when everyone knew that Shield was going to break up, everyone's money was on Dean Ambrose, who was already turning. It's either they're doing a match with the Wyatt family. He left and they never explained why he didn't come back. Everyone thought it would be Dean. Everyone was cheering for Roman, so it wouldn't be him. Everyone expected to be Dean, so it wouldn't be him. The last one left was Seth. And in doing so, in dismantling the Shield and laying them out as well as he did, it ensured that each member of the Shield would then go on to be world champion and would set them up to each have incredible solo runs. So when I talk about the great three-man tag teams, I always put the Freebirds up top. I put the Shield next only because of the individual success of each man. But if it weren't for the Freebirds, there would be no Shield and there would be no New Day. But the dissolution of the Shield was one of the best heel turns in professional wrestling. Something that never happens anymore. I haven't seen a good heel turn that's gone on 6 years now. And that was June 2nd, 2014. Today, in wrestling history, 1991. Steve Austin talked about this during his interview with The Undertaker. The Undertaker, when he first got into the business and when he came to the WWF as The Undertaker, he was immediately thrust into the ring with his hero Dusty Rhodes and Ted DiBiase and guys that he grew up watching, and was overwhelmed, didn't know what to think. And when he was told he was going to dominate everyone, he was like, okay. And then Steve Austin told the story, well, I felt the same way. In 1991, they wanted me to go over Bobby Eaton for the TV title. And I was like, I couldn't lace that guy's boots.
Yeah.
But on this date, 1991, stunning Steve Austin defeated Bobby Eaton for the WCW TV Championship. That would be Austin's first singles title in WCW. And ironically, that would be the only singles title that Bobby Eaton would ever hold in WCW.
So stupid. So
But
stupid.
a superstar was being born. Anyone with two eyes could see how good Steve Austin was. And obviously, Bobby Eaton is no slouch. And if anyone could make anyone look good, it's Bobby Eaton. But Austin, even said to this day, I couldn't lace that guy's boots, but they wanted me to go over. And over he did. Today, June 3rd, 1991, Steve Austin won his first singles title in WCW by beating Bobby Eaton. Also on this date, 16 years ago, and June 3rd, 2004, after 2 years, As a pay-per-view only company, the very first episode of TNA Impact aired today on Fox Sports Net, of all places. Can you believe they put wrestling on
Yeah.
Fox?
Oh yeah. They
Yeah.
used to have the ticker at the bottom and like the like the HD ribbon at the top to keep you the time limit and all that crap. They tried. I liked it. I liked that they attempted the realism of it still that late. And I remember, and of course I'll let you take back over. I used to have to, when my mom moved down to where she lives, not going to give it away, you suckers. She lived at the part of the Jersey Shore that is smack dab in the middle of Philly and New York Metro, right?
Okay.
So she used to get Philly channels and New York channels. Where I lived in Jersey, South Jersey, I could not watch Fox Sports Net.
Wow.
I would, every 2 weeks, I'd go visit mom and watch both shows, both episodes, late at night after everybody went to sleep. I'd watch it by myself, get caught up, and then go home. No, I'd spend time with my mom, too.
Of course.
Yeah, but wrestling, Mom. I was like, Mom, I'm coming to Brown's Wrestling this week. Okay. Are you going to hang with me? Sure, we'll have a barbecue. Can I just watch wrestling? I don't care.
But also on that same day, June 2nd, 2004, when TNA Impact aired on Fox Sports Net, it was also the debut of the six-sided ring.
That's right. That's right. They waited till I know. Listen, I'm not to preface this with. I understand how wrestlers prefer or do not prefer that ring. Again, Impact for a little while was doing the right things and making it different, giving you an alternative from the WWE and whatever else was on TV at the time. I saw a top 10 the other day. That was at the late end of the blue era, as I call it, when they still had this. They went back to Square Ring and just seeing all those people there. And again, man, it was so good. It was so good. And there was so many people there for a long time.
Yeah.
Frustrating.
It is. But also got out to a great start 16 years ago today. They had the first TV match on TNA Impact, June 3rd, 2004.
I'm old. Whew.
And that, gentlemen, ladies, and others, is the wrestling historian.
We are now done for the evening. I want to thank everybody for coming in here. I think I already know who we're going to raid, so those on Twitch, please hang on at least 5 minutes to join in on the raid. I would greatly appreciate it. And please follow me on all social media platforms at Danilo83. Like, share, subscribe, YouTube, and Twitch. Follow me, please. Follow me, please. VOCNation.com to listen on the computer, or if you go to your smartphone, whatever smartphone you have, go to your podcast app, type in VOC Nation Radio Network, subscribe, and listen to the podcast there. Craig, where can people follow you, my good sir?
If they would like, they could follow me on Twitter, on Facebook, and on Instagram at Craig Lagons, CraigLiggeons.